Hi everyone, I'm Tom. I'm a senior AE here at Dragonfly. Been here for a year and a half, but it's felt like 12 years in startup life. It's my first real foray into startup life, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind, I must admit. We've had a lot of fun along the way. A little bit about me. I'm an identical twin. I'm half Indonesian, and I've got a little sausage dog called Harry, who's the light of my life. Sounds like two truths and a lie, that, doesn't it, a little bit? But yeah, over to you, Becky.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Becky. I'm Partnerships Director here at Dragonfly. Been here for, I think, about 4 years. I have worked in probably every single department within Dragonfly, apart from the tech team, still waiting to be in James's team. But yeah, I didn't realise, Tom, that you were going to do exciting things about yourself. But yeah, I'm Becky, been here 4 years. And I think Harry, your dog, actually prefers me to you, doesn't she?
So, some quick context, as there's a reason why this podcast has changed its name. So we used to be called Game of Attention. I don't know if any of you out there have seen our mugs on a previous Dragonfly podcast. And attention still does matter. If people don't look, nothing else happens, obviously. But attention isn't enough anymore. And being seen doesn't mean always about being felt. Being felt doesn't mean about being remembered. And being remembered is actually what drives growth as well. And that shift is exactly why Dragonfly has evolved and why the podcast has too. The Dragonfly is a creative confidence platform that uses AI trained on eye tracking, neuroscience and behavioral science to predict how creative will perform before it goes live. Not just what people will look at, but what they'll emotionally respond to as well, and what's likely to stick in memory. So this show is now called The Creative Edge, because the edge isn't just attention, it's understanding the full picture of how creative works in the human mind. And that's the new era we're here to talk about today. And today, in our first episode, we're discussing a new era of creative effectiveness. Do you want to do an intro to Ali?
Yeah, so welcome to the first podcast of the new rebrand. We're delighted that we have you joining us today. For all of the listeners, we are joined by Dr. Ali Goode. Goode.
You can call me God if you want.
Good. Dr. Ali God. Dr. Ali God, Dr. Ali Goode for anyone that's listening, who is a cognitive scientist. We have been delighted with having Ali join us. Has it been in the past year?
It's about 18 months now, yeah.
About 18 months. And Ali has come in and really spearheaded the development of memory and emotion, which has been super exciting. Ali, I know that you have a wealth of experience in behavioural sciences, and I thought that maybe if we could get started with a quick career highlight from yourself, other than working with Tom and I, obviously your main career highlight, but if you could give us a quick highlight.
So I started life as an academic in a part of experimental psychology, and got to work with some fun people, including the guy who was accredited with not only coming up with the term cognitive science, but also they call him the grandfather of AI, because he kind of supervised the PhDs of the guys who invented it, allegedly. So one of the very early pioneers in the 50s of artificial intelligence. So it's been in my career all the way through. Skipped over to media research about 25 years ago. And because I was a cognitive scientist and was fairly, people hadn't come across them, I ended up working with people like ITV and Sky and ThinkBox predominantly. And I've done a lot of work in things like creating how TV sponsorship works. So that was done 18 years ago, whatever. And that's been highly successful. And also more recently, when everybody talked about attention, they went, oh yeah, he's that guy who knows about science, go and ask him. So I did a whole bunch of work with both ITV and ThinkBox on attention.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that introduction. And obviously, we're going to ask you a number of different questions today. So really excited for you to share a bit more into experience and your perspectives. Great. So obviously, the whole point of today's podcast and the main theme of today's podcast is talking about creative effectiveness and redefining creative effectiveness. So my first question to you, Ali, and in your opinion, We talk endlessly around performance, but far less about actual creative itself and whether it's effective. What do you think, and why do you think that is?
I think it's a lot of focus on why we don't talk about what's creative is because it's something quite ethereal, it's something quite intangible. I was on the awards committee for the IPA, the big IPA awards, a few years ago, and I kind of noted that there are a lot of agencies. I mean, agencies are really good at getting things right, big ad agencies, but they don't necessarily always know why they get them right, I think, because a lot of the papers that I read, more or less the structure was, brand had a problem, they came to us, creative magic happened and it worked. And I think what the interest is now, I mean, certainly the world of attention has started focusing on kind of some of the science that's behind these things. So I think we're starting to talk more about how creatives work and how they influence people, and more how people perceive them. And this is where the next follow on is course for memory and emotion. But certainly that started the conversation. And I think, I mean, it's also because I think it's a very hard thing for people to define as to why it happened. So when I was an academic, the guy I worked with was in charge of admissions to the university. And he was a very good statistician, and he came up with this idea that he was going to do all this big statistical analysis of why people came to our university, and it was all going to be perfect, and then he'd know what to do, he'd recruit them, and it'd be absolutely fine. Basically being like a marketer. So he checked like all the A-level grades and the courses they did and where they came from and all of this kind of stuff, and he found nothing. But he did notice that some open days were more successful than others. And he then started analysing open days. He said, okay, what are we doing right? You know, where are we taking them? What information are we giving them? All of that kind of stuff. And again, he found absolutely nothing. And he did this for like 3 years, and he came up with zip. So he then kind of just had a thought one morning, and he then checked it for the next 2 years, and there was one factor alone. I mean, I should have to say that when he asked the students, they told him all about what was on the course and the grades and all the things that the students would think they would say. But he had this idea, and he went and he tested it for 2 years running, and it absolutely was spot on, which was that if they came to the university when it was sunny, they'd come and stay and apply, and if they didn't and it was raining, they'd go away. One thing he couldn't control was the weather. Yeah. And even though all the students said, no, it's because of the course, it's because of the grades I got, it's because of all that stuff, absolutely not. I think it's the same with advertising. People think brands work in a certain way, but actually what's really working can be something very different, and something that they're not aware is influencing them. I think that's another reason why we struggle to talk about creativity, because we know it affects us, but it's not necessarily why and all those things behind why it works that we are actually able to verbalize or talk about or kind of, tell people.
Great.
From a scientific perspective, bit of a controversial question, I think, anyway.
From you,
what do you think? Me, controversial? I don't think so.
Never.
What do you think is kind of broken, actually, in how creative performance or creative effectiveness is actually understood today?
I think, one of my career tub thumps that I've been doing for many, many years is in a similar vein. And I think the way in which things are measured is it doesn't necessarily align with how they work. So let's assume that there's all this kind of, you've got brands love to have propositions, brands love to have information, brands love to have facts, and they measure that by getting people, asking people, saying, do you remember who said this? But the psychology behind that is that you've got kind of memory, different kinds of memory, which is, you've got one which is episodic memory, which is the conscious mental reconstruction of a past event. Long description, but you get there. So if I said to you, what did you have for breakfast this morning, you could go back in your mind and you could remember what you bought or what you ate. You could relive that up, and that's good. It's an episode in your life. That's why it's called episodic memory. And I think a lot of brands try to test their creators based on people's episodic memory of them. And that's only going to be a small part of it that's going to be influential. I think there's a bunch of other psychological processes that actually are influential. And probably the one thing that I would advise people to do is not just go on, did they recall seeing my advert? Did they consciously, mentally reconstruct the experience of being outside, sitting in front of the TV, hearing on the radio, looking on a website? Did they go, oh yes, I saw an advert for, because there's a lot going on apart from that.
And in your scientific background, what do you think happens cognitively when someone encounters a brand asset for less than a second?
It's almost like, I did my PhD in that, which I did. There are lots of things that happen when we encounter something. Firstly, we'll create a visual trace of it. So a lot of work that I did many years ago was let's deal with the visual first, is to think about, when you see something, you visually process it, and that visual process becomes a trace. And then it's almost infinite as to the amount of that you can store in the mind. And that's a very low-level kind of visual representation, so that when you encounter it again, you will process it more fluently. There's a guy called Robert Zions, spelled Zanjonc. People call him Zajonc, but it's called Zions. He did a lot of work on what's called the mirror exposure effect, where you present things, literally could present things for like a hundredth of a second, 10 milliseconds, very, very short time. And yet he could show this effect of exposure. So clearly that happens immediately. We know also from attention that when people see something, there will be lots of visual features about it that will then indicate where they check their eyes first. The brain's incredibly good at going, there's something there, I'm going to process it at this kind of low level, and we know where it's going to hit first. And that's obviously a lot of the work that Dr. Hamid Sayal at Queen Mary's has done, who's obviously behind a lot of the attention stuff. That as well. And then from that point, there'll be another competing spot that goes, right, what's next? And so you have this kind of pattern. So in the first second, you'll probably make 3 eye movements, because we tend to make about an eye movement every third of a second, except one respondent I did eye tracking with once who made 5 movements in 1 second, and that could only be achieved under the influence of some very heavy stimulants.
Amazing.
So basically the brain's very, very good at fixating first, where am I going to look at first, and then working at a pattern from that.
And I guess that sort of re-emphasises the whole importance of attention. I mean, obviously our bread and butter is attention at Dragonfly, and we started with attention, and I always see that attention is obviously so important, exactly to what you were saying, is we talk about memory and we talk about emotion, but actually even what we're talking about now is your eyes have a few movements, and it's about capturing that attention in the first instance. I had a couple of questions, and obviously when we talk about memory and emotion, so many brands want to be memorable and they want to be emotive. When they are successful at being memorable, what are the things that actually stick in the human brain? And I know we've done a lot of research into emotional memory and the algorithms that we've got today as part of Dragonfly. But what is it? And I know you're going to tell me there's loads, but yes. What is it that makes things memorable for brands and for consumers?
There's loads.
I knew it.
Yeah. It depends what you mean by memory. Again, I go back to what I said about people thinking that memory is only this ability to consciously, mentally reconstruct a past event.
Yeah.
Now, it is absolutely true that there is, because basically memory is split into 3 processes. There's encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is how it gets in there. Storage is actually how it's stored, and retrieval is how it comes back to us. And it's not just this kind of, okay, I remember that, I'm going to recall that, as in I'm going to mentally reconstruct that and go back to it. So there's a lot of layers to that, I think, is the answer. Was there anything specific about that you sort of were leading towards in that question?
No, I think mainly what I get asked when we're chatting to customers is sort of, what can I do to make it more memorable? So there must be certain examples. So I'm going to guess, and I think I know this, but things like rhyme and repetition.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a whole bunch of rules. I mean, the one thing about AI, because that's what we're using, is that it's exceptionally good. AI is good at some stuff. It's not so good at other stuff. So I did prepare a joke to explain this.
Here we go.
Right, setting this up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Guy goes to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, "Okay, I'm going to give you this chocolate rabbit. I'm going to leave for a bit, and when I come back, we're going to start talking." So the psychiatrist goes, and he comes back, and he says, "Okay." I says, "Well, why'd you give him the chocolate rabbit?" And he said, "Well, it's for, I wanted to see how you ate it. If you ate the ears first, you're kind of normal. If you ate the feet first, you might be a little bit insecure. If you ate the tail first, you might be anally retentive and have kind of, obsessive compulsive issues. Or if you ate the stomach first, you might have a latent Oedipal complex and have kind of maternal attachment issues." The man thought for a bit and he said, "What does it mean if you bite the eyes out and scream, 'Stop staring at me'?" That's a good joke. But also,
should have known it wasn't going to be a knock-knock joke. That one.
No, it wasn't. No, yeah, it wasn't.
Also, definitely laugh before the punchline.
But jokes work. If you look at the psychology of humour, jokes work in two ways. A lot of jokes work by the setup being, there is a rule to it, where you set up a kind of reality, set up a sort of scenario, and then the punchline sort of breaks that scenario and makes you reinterpret the first one. So like the guy walks into a bar, clang, it was an iron bar, for example. So there's a lot of a double meaning in there. That's one way in which it works, and that's kind of the way in which AI is good at working. It's good at rules. What AI can't do yet, I say yet, but what it can't do is do the other part of the joke, because that joke is funny because you can see, under the theory of mind, that's the ability to put yourself in the position of somebody else. So you can see what the psychiatrist was trying to do and see how he failed doing it, and that's the humour in there. But our ability to have that theory of mind allows us to also find the joke funny at that level. AI can't do that yet. It can't have a theory of mind. It can't feel like what it is to be a human being, because there's embodiment. We live in this kind of biological entity, we have sensations, all of that kind of stuff it can't do. So what we've done with AI and how it works is it's about the rules. So what we're doing with all of this stuff is trying to find where there are rules and then using the AI to work those rules rather than trying to get it to simulate a human being, which it can't do very well. What AI can do, and we've looked at about 140 odd so far across memory, emotion and attention. Or I think it's probably even more than that now. But there's all these things that AI is fantastic at getting all of these rules, like you say, like rhyme, like rhythm, like making sure the text is correct, making sure the linguistic density is fine. That means the language makes sense, making sure the words aren't unusual or weird, or everything's printed in a certain way, making sure the layout makes sense, it's easily to view, make all of these things, making sure the emotional content is easy to perceive and also then has the appropriate valence, appropriate effect, all of that kind of stuff. These are all rules that we can use and can get AI to apply. But getting them to try to think like a human being and going, okay, does that proposition relate to me, is a different thing. And that's what AI is not that good at. And that was a very long answer.
Yeah, long answer. Love it. I know Tom's got a couple of questions around sort of AI and how it is used within behavioural sciences today. But I've just one more question on behavioural sciences before we go on to that, and that's, why is emotion so closely tied with memory?
This is a belief that people have, and absolutely, if you, at the point of encoding, it's that the memory has encoding, storage and retrieval, then emotion is involved, and if you encode something at a point where emotions are heightened, more or less it's there to tell you that that's an important thing to remember. So as we evolved, if you saw a scary creature that nearly killed you or nearly ate you, you'd see it again and you would go, and I know to remember not to do that because that thing's dangerous to me. So that's how emotions become linked. But emotions are far more than just these kind of tags, kind of the ability to consciously recall stuff. they actually act as memories in their own right. So going back to the mere exposure effect, when you see something very fleetingly, next time you see it, you process it more fluidly, which means the experience of processing it is much easier. And that then comes back to you as a sensation. So this mere exposure effect is based on liking, based on emotional response. So emotional response, again, is also related to this experience. I mean, another thing is called evaluative conditioning. That's where if you put a happy thing with a neutral thing, the neutral thing gets happier, the happy thing gets more neutral. And again, I think that's a lot of things that, we see. You can see every brand asset tries to embody some emotion within it that it wants to impart, and impart that to the brand. So you do have, I mean, there's a lot of the stuff that Myron Sharp's work has done is it's sort of approaching this, but it's not quite got there yet. But yeah, so it is all about, emotion and memory are intrinsically linked. And yes, emotion at encoding does increase the amount, and this is what a lot of tests, such as the old link test, suggests, that actually you've got to be emotional and then that causes recall. That's correct, but that is not the whole story. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on.
Going back to the AI piece that we were just discussing, I think everyone knows that AI is a buzzword. It's the word of the moment at the moment. It's that much of a buzzword we put it into the name of our company. Every brand that we speak to wants to incorporate AI at some point in their creative process. Every agency we speak to is exactly the same. I think it would be good to understand where you think AI can meaningfully improve creative effectiveness today, not just on the efficiencies or the scale, but where in the process do you think AI can actually...
So AI has a lot of practical applications. In the creative process, we see a lot of generative AI, and absolutely AI can create a whole bunch of ideas and a whole bunch of executions, and some of them will be brilliant, but AI won't know that. That's the kind of difference. It can do it. It can do all these kind of interesting, creative and wonderful things. But will it be able to identify that there is something that will appeal to an audience? Probably not yet. Another massive name drop. An old mate of mine called Anil Seth is one of probably the leading expert in consciousness in the world, a neuroscientist. I just happened to do a PhD with him many years ago. And his view is that artificial intelligence is going to get way more intelligent, but don't assume that all the human qualities are going to follow automatically, things like consciousness. So it may happen, but it's not necessarily a given that things could be very intelligent. But will it have self-awareness? Will it have theory of mind? So I think you do have to. I mean, a lot of what brands want to do, a lot of what consumer insight is about theory of mind. It's about giving marketers the ability to put themselves in the minds of the consumer, understand the world from the consumer's perspective, and then try and work out what they need to say, what their products they need that will satisfy their needs, all of that kind of stuff. Getting AI to try and simulate that, I don't think is not what it's best at doing. It can simulate it to an extent, but it's not what it's best at doing. What it's best at doing is saying, here's a stimulus, here's a thing, let's work out how it's viewed, let's work out how memorable it is, let's work out how emotional it is. AI is fantastic at doing that. Yeah. And that's why we focused it on that. So that's where I think from a creative perspective, there's a lot of opportunity with AI. And also because, the brands just don't have the budget to test everything they put out.
Yeah, absolutely. We hear that all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, is it 95% goes untested or 90% goes untested? Something like that. It's a huge amount.
It's crazy.
And it's not about trying to making everything, like you've put it through a big piece of, benchmark research. But if you can it's all like marginal gain. So you can make those things more perceivable, easy to understand, a bit more memorable, emotionally right. Yeah. That's a big, big, big gain across everything we do.
And do you think it should sit, because of that, do you think it should sit earlier on in that creative process then, or as a validation layer, effectively, before launch?
I think it sits in both.
Yeah.
I think you can
I would agree.
I think you have a they have the ability to generate stuff. You have to generate stuff. I mean, if you start to look at all the rules, you have the ability to generate stuff probably more effectively and have a better hit rate, have a better chance of producing something that's going to work. But also have that kind of filtering layer where you can filter to make sure that everything is right before you then, if you've got a big thing. I mean, the other great advantage of looking at it from this rule-based thing is it applies to everything. It applies to all the brand assets. It applies to anywhere that you put them, and it applies to anyone that you show them to. Because brains more or less work in the same way. There are human differences across different audiences about all the different kinds of things that we actually, we worry about. We kind of, what you like is different to what I like, and we're personal difference. That's very hard to simulate. But what we can do is make sure that our perceptual systems, our memories, our language systems, all that is working in a very similar way.
One thing that I think both Becky and I and anyone here at Dragonfly gets asked speaking to brands is, obviously we've launched our new memory and emotion metrics. There's been a big hoo-ha about it. Like, we've been waiting for it for so long and now it's officially live, and we've had so much interest about it, and everyone is so excited, including us. The one thing that we do get asked quite a lot is how credible it is and how credible AI is predicting emotional and memory response compared to how they would usually do it, the focus groups, the traditional kind of testing methods. So yeah, how accurate is it?
So at the moment, I mean, we went into this. So I kind of did all the sort of the background psychology, and all the clever mathematicians did all the maths. And at the start of this, we more or less kind of, went in with this expectation of how accurate it would be. And we blew it out of the water, which was really amazing, because we thought it was going to be, at a certain level, but actually achieved far higher than that. And I think attention at the moment is 89% accurate, our potential product. But memory and emotion will go to 83 and 80%. But think of it more as being like you can, in effect, run every asset through a group of kind of like, it's like a focus group. It's not like a quant study type, but with 34 and 36 people. Great. They can deal with everyone. So it's pretty good.
On that 89% accuracy score for attention, what do you say about other algorithms that say that they're at 95 to 99% accuracy?
That's a loaded.
Ouch! Tom! Came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Careful what you say here, Ellie.
I am not the mathematician, but looking at understanding statistics enough, then that is a claim that I'm sure for a very narrow set of stimulus is possible, but it's not for everything, and we quote for everything.
Emphasis on narrow set of stimulus.
Mathematically, we're not sure how they can make that claim. Doesn't mean they we would be interested to see the data behind it.
Great. And just sort of wrapping some things up then with a couple of questions. One thing that brands should start or stop doing when judging creative effectiveness.
I will go back again to stop using recall. It's a terrible measure.
Great.
It doesn't tell you that much about emotion. It doesn't tell you. It's really is like the sort of the top skin on the cherry, on the icing, on the cake of the creative that you're measuring, and there's plenty more to it. If you have an AI system that does something, and you feed a whole load of assets into it, like let's just call it a whole load of adverts into it, and then you come out with a kind of like scores of those things in, the AI is going to learn the kind of to associate things in that creative that scored whatever. But what it's not going to do is be able to be diagnostic as to why that's happened. So it will sort of know good from bad, but it won't be able to tell you why that's good from bad. And I think there's also a problem. There's a bit of a regression to the mean issue there as well, that it'll kind of average out everything. And so you will end up with this kind of sort of averagey kind of sort of assumptions, rather than actually going and going, okay. I mean, at the moment in time, as I say, AI is not very good at being a human being. it can't do that yet. Possibly may really struggle to do that ever, but that's what my Professor Arnold says. Anyway, he wrote a book on it. I trust it. Anyway,
I trust him too.
Yeah, but so I think we will still always need people to have that creative edge, to have that creative edge. Whoa. Anyway, but to have that kind of insight into human understanding. So I can remember being you when I was your age, but you live in a different world to me. But I can understand the kind of things that might appeal to you.
Yeah.
Because I can understand what it's like to be you. AI can't. And I think you will always need brands to have that kind of, those people in working with brands or people within brands to have that kind of insight into the human condition, to be able to go, I get what appeals to them. And I get, and I can put myself in their shoes and I go, I know what they want. And I think that's where AI has still a journey to go to get close to that.
Amazing. Ali, I wish I could sit and chat to you all day, even though I kind of do. But thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope that you've enjoyed today. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that I've even taken back from today. But yeah, thanks for joining us today.